Chapter 1: The Enigma of the Mind. Thoughts are the invisible threads that weave the fabric of our existence. They shape our decisions, fuel our emotions, and define our reality. Yet, for something so central to human experience, thoughts remain one of the greatest mysteries. What exactly is a thought? Is it a fleeting electrical impulse in the brain, a whisper from the soul, or something else entirely? And where do they originate, from the depths of our biology, the influences of our environment, or perhaps a realm beyond the physical? In this opening chapter, we embark on a journey to unravel these questions. We'll explore the basic definitions and common intuitions about thoughts, setting the stage for deeper dives into science, philosophy, and beyond in the chapters to come. By the end, you'll have a foundational understanding of why thoughts captivate thinkers across disciplines and why pinpointing their source is no simple task. At its core, a thought is an internal mental event. It's that voice in your head narrating your day, the sudden idea that sparks innovation, or the nagging worry that keeps you up at night. Psychologists often describe thoughts as cognitive processes involving perception, memory, reasoning, and imagination. But this definition barely scratches the surface. Consider the variety of thoughts we experience. There are propositional thoughts, like "I need to buy milk," which carry specific content and can be true or false. Then there are imagistic thoughts, such as visualizing a beach vacation, where no words are involved, just vivid mental pictures. Emotions often intertwine with thoughts, turning a simple observation into a complex feeling. That sunset is beautiful might evoke awe or nostalgia. Philosophers like René Descartes famously pondered thoughts as evidence of existence. I think, therefore I am. For Descartes, thoughts were the undeniable proof of a thinking self, separate from the unreliable senses. This dualistic view, separating mind from body, has influenced centuries of debate. But in modern times, neuroscientists view thoughts as emergent properties of brain activity, not ethereal entities. Think about your own mind for a moment. Right now, as you read these words, thoughts are bubbling up. Perhaps you're evaluating the ideas presented, recalling a related memory, or even wandering off to unrelated daydreams. This stream of consciousness, as psychologist William James called it, flows continuously, rarely pausing except in deep sleep or meditation. But why do thoughts feel so personal and private? Unlike spoken words or actions, thoughts occur in the sanctuary of our skulls, inaccessible to others unless we choose to share them. This privacy leads to fascinating phenomena, like mind wandering, those moments when your thoughts drift away from the task at hand. Research shows that people spend nearly half their waking hours in this state, often without realizing it. It's as if thoughts have a life of their own, emerging unbidden from some hidden source. Cultural perspectives add layers to this. In Western societies, thoughts are often seen as rational tools for problem solving. In Eastern traditions, like Buddhism, thoughts are viewed as transient illusions to be observed rather than identified with. The practice of mindfulness, for instance, teaches us to watch thoughts arise and pass without attachment, hinting that their origins might be more fluid than fixed. If we probe the question of where thoughts come from, the brain is the obvious starting point. The human brain, with its 86 billion neurons and trillions of synaptic connections, is a powerhouse of activity. Thoughts, in this view, arise from the intricate dance of neurotransmitters firing across neural networks. For example, when you solve a puzzle, specific regions like the prefrontal cortex light up, processing information and generating ideas. Yet, biology alone doesn't explain everything. Environmental factors play a crucial role. Your thoughts are shaped by experiences, from childhood upbringing to daily interactions. A traumatic event might seed recurring anxious thoughts, while an inspiring conversation could birth creative ones. Social influences, like media and culture, further mold our mental landscape, introducing ideas that become our own. Then there's the philosophical angle. Are thoughts purely material, or do they hint at something immaterial? Materialists argue that thoughts are nothing more than brain states, reducible to physical processes. Idealists, conversely, posit that reality itself is mental, with thoughts as the fundamental building blocks. And what about quantum theory suggesting consciousness collapses wave functions, implying thoughts influence the physical world? These questions highlight the interdisciplinary nature of our inquiry. Neuroscience provides empirical data, psychology offers behavioral insights, philosophy probes the metaphysics, and even physics and spirituality contribute perspectives. Investigating thoughts isn't straightforward. They can't be directly observed. We rely on self-reports, brain scans, or behavioral experiments. Functional MRI, fMRI machines can show brain activity correlated with thoughts, but correlation isn't causation. Can we ever truly know if a lit-up brain region is the thought or just its shadow? Moreover, thoughts are subjective. What feels like a profound insight to one person might seem trivial to another. This subjectivity complicates universal theories. Ethical considerations arise too. Probing the mind raises privacy concerns, especially with advancing technologies like brain-computer interfaces. This chapter has introduced the enigma of thoughts, their definitions, everyday manifestations, and preliminary clues to their origins. We've seen how they bridge the personal and the universal, the biological and the abstract. In the chapters that follow, we'll delve deeper. Chapter 2 will explore historical perspectives, from ancient philosophers to early scientists, tracing how humanity's understanding of thoughts has evolved. Chapter 2. As we delve deeper into the mystery of thoughts, it's essential to look back at how humanity has grappled with this question through the ages. Our modern understanding didn't emerge in a vacuum, it's built on millennia of speculation, observation, and debate. From ancient civilizations pondering the soul to Enlightenment thinkers dissecting the mind, historical perspectives offer a rich tapestry of ideas. These views not only reveal evolving concepts of thoughts but also highlight enduring puzzles that persist today. In this chapter, we'll trace the chronology of thought theories, starting with prehistoric and ancient intuitions, moving through classical philosophy, medieval and Renaissance shifts, and ending with early scientific approaches. By examining these milestones, we'll see how cultural, religious, and technological contexts shaped beliefs about where thoughts come from, be it divine inspiration, bodily humors, or mechanical processes. This historical lens will prepare us for the scientific revolutions explored in later chapters. Long before written records, early humans likely experienced thoughts as integral to survival, planning hunts, interpreting dreams, or navigating social bonds. Archaeological evidence, such as cave paintings from 40,000 years ago, suggests symbolic thinking, implying thoughts transcended mere instinct. But where did they originate? Many prehistoric cultures attributed thoughts to spiritual realms. Animistic beliefs posited that thoughts arose from interactions with nature spirits or ancestors, a view echoed in indigenous traditions worldwide. In ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, around 3000 BCE, thoughts were linked to the heart or soul. Egyptian texts describe the Ka, life force, and Ba, personality, as sources of mental activity, with the brain dismissed as mere filler. The heart, they believed, housed intelligence and emotions, weighing it in the afterlife to judge one's thoughts and deeds. Similarly, Sumerian epics like the Epic of Gilgamesh portray thoughts as divine gifts or curses, emerging from gods influencing human affairs. Ancient India and China offered more systematic views. In Vedic texts, circa 1500 BCE, thoughts, manas, stemmed from the Atman, self or soul, connected to the cosmic Brahman. The Upanishads describe thoughts as vibrations in the mind, arising from sensory inputs but ultimately rooted in eternal consciousness. Chinese philosophers like Confucius, 551 to 479 BCE, saw thoughts as products of moral cultivation, originating from the heart-mind, Xin, balanced by heaven's mandate. Daoist thinkers, such as Laozi, viewed thoughts as natural flows from the Tao, warning against overthinking as disruption of harmony. These early ideas emphasize thoughts as ethereal or divine, not strictly biological, a theme that would evolve but never fully vanish. The Greeks revolutionized the discourse, shifting from myth to logic. Plato, 427 to 347 BCE, proposed a dualistic framework in works like the Republic. Thoughts, for Plato, originated in the immortal soul, divided into rational, spirited, and appetitive parts. The rational soul accessed eternal forms, perfect ideas beyond the physical world, through dialectic. Sensory thoughts were mere shadows, unreliable copies of true reality. Plato's allegory of the cave illustrates this. Prisoners mistaking shadows for truth represent minds trapped in illusion, with true thoughts emerging from philosophical assent. Aristotle, 384 to 322 BCE, Plato's student, grounded thoughts more in the empirical. In De Anima, he described the soul as the form of the body, with thoughts arising from the active intellect, nous poeticos, which abstracts universals from sensory data. The brain cooled blood, but the heart was the seat of sensation and thought. Aristotle's hylomorphism, matter and form united, suggested thoughts emerged from biological processes informed by purpose, telos. In the Hellenistic period, Stoics like Epictetus viewed thoughts as judgments, prohairesis, on impressions, originating from the rational logos pervading the universe. Epicureans, following Democritus' atomism, saw thoughts as atomic configurations in the mind, purely material and mechanistic. Roman thinkers built on this. Cicero integrated Greek ideas, emphasizing thoughts as tools for virtue, while Galen, 129 to 216 CE, a physician, advanced anatomical views. Dissecting animals, he linked thoughts to the brain's ventricles, where animal spirits, pneuma, process sensations. This marked a tentative move toward neurology. The Middle Ages blended classical philosophy with monotheistic religions. In Islamic Golden Age, 8th to 13th centuries, scholars like Avicenna, Ibn Sina, synthesized Aristotle and Plato with Quranic ideas. In the Book of Healing, Avicenna described thoughts as faculties of the soul, common sense, imagination, and intellect, arising from the brain but illuminated by divine active intellect. Al-Ghazali critiqued pure rationalism, arguing thoughts could deceive, with true knowledge from divine revelation. Christian thinkers like Augustine, 354 to 430 CE, saw thoughts as reflections of God's image, originating in the soul's trinity of memory, understanding, and will. In Confessions, he explored inner dialogue as communion with the divine. Thomas Aquinas, 1225 to 1274, or reconciled faith and reason, positing thoughts as abstractions by the agent intellect, rooted in sensory experience but elevated by God. The Renaissance revived humanism and empiricism. Descartes, 1596 to 1650, as mentioned in Chapter 1, radicalized dualism with his Meditations. Thoughts, cogitations, proved existence, originating in the residential cogitans, thinking substance, distinct from the body. He located the mind-body interface in the pineal gland, where thoughts influenced actions via animal spirits. Montaigne's essays questioned thoughts' reliability, seeing them as subjective fluxes shaped by experience. Hobbes, 1588 to 1679, a materialist, in Leviathan described thoughts as a decaying sense, motions in the brain from external pressures, purely physical. The scientific revolution mechanized the mind. Newton's physics influenced views of thoughts as law-governed processes. Locke, 1632 to 1704, in an essay concerning human understanding portrayed the mind as a tabula rasa, blank slate, with thoughts originating from sensations and reflections. Simple ideas combined into complex ones via association. Hume, 1711 to 1776, extended this empiricism, arguing thoughts were impressions or ideas, linked by resemblance, contiguity, and cause-effect. No self beyond the bundle of perceptions, thoughts emerged from habitual connections, not innate structures. Kant, 1724 to 1804, countered with transcendental idealism in Critique of Pure Reason. Thought structured experience through a priori categories, space, time, causality, originating in the mind's synthetic activity, not just passive reception. By the 19th century, phrenology, Gall, mapped thoughts to brain regions, while Darwin's evolution suggested thoughts as adaptive traits, emerging from natural selection. This historical survey shows a progression from spiritual to material explanations, yet dualism lingers. Ancient views emphasized divine or cosmic origins, classical philosophy introduced reason and biology, medieval synthesis added faith, and early science stressed empiricism and mechanism. These shifts reflect broader cultural changes, from mysticism to rationalism, theology to experimentation. Gaps remain. How do subjective thoughts arise from objective matter? Historical thinkers laid foundations, but modern science, as we'll see in Chapter 3, builds on them with empirical tools. Chapter 3. Having traced the historical evolution of ideas about thoughts, from divine sparks to mechanical motions, we now turn to the empirical frontier, neuroscience. This field, armed with advanced imaging and experimental techniques, seeks to demystify thoughts by mapping them to the brain's intricate architecture. Where do thoughts come from in this view? Largely from the symphony of neurons firing in concert, shaped by genetics, experience, and environment. Yet, as we'll see, even with cutting-edge tools, the leap from brain activity to subjective experience remains a profound challenge. In this chapter, we'll explore key brain structures involved in thought processes, the mechanisms of neural communication, influential theories like connectionism, and the limitations of current neuroscience. By grounding our inquiry in biology, we'll build a bridge from ancient speculations to modern evidence, setting the stage for psychological perspectives in the next chapter. The human brain, a 3-pound organ of astonishing complexity, is the primary suspect in the origins of thoughts. Comprising about 86 billion neurons and an equal number of glial cells, it's organized into regions specialized for different functions, yet highly interconnected. At the forefront is the cerebral cortex, the wrinkled outer layer responsible for higher-order thinking. Divided into lobes, frontal, planning and decision-making, parietal, sensory integration, temporal, memory and language, and occipital, vision, it processes information in a distributed manner. Thoughts aren't confined to one area. A simple idea like maple might activate visual cortex for imagery, temporal for associations, and frontal for evaluation. Deeper structures play crucial roles too. The hippocampus, nestled in the temporal lobe, is vital for forming memories, which underpin reflective thoughts. Damage here, as in Alzheimer's, disrupts thought coherence. The amygdala, part of the limbic system, infuses thoughts with emotion. Fearful thoughts arise when it detects threats. The thalamus acts as a relay station, filtering sensory inputs that seed thoughts. Then there's the prefrontal cortex, PFC, often dubbed the CEO of the brain. It's central to executive functions, working memory, where thoughts are held and manipulated, inhibition, suppressing irrelevant thoughts, and cognitive flexibility, shifting between ideas. Neuroimaging shows PFC activation during problem-solving, suggesting thoughts emerge from its integrative prowess. How do these structures generate thoughts? It starts at the cellular level. Neurons communicate via electrochemical signals. When stimulated, a neuron fires an action potential, a brief electrical pulse, releasing neurotransmitters like glutamate, excitatory, or GABA, inhibitory, into synapses, the gaps between cells. Thoughts arise from patterns of these firings across networks. Hebb's rule, cells that fire together wire together, explains how experiences strengthen connections, forming neural pathways. For instance, learning a skill creates thought patterns that become automatic. Advanced imaging techniques reveal this in action. Functional MRI, fMRI, measures blood flow as a proxy for activity, showing brain regions lighting up during tasks. Electroencephalography, EEG, captures electrical rhythms, like alpha waves in relaxed mind-wandering or beta in focused thinking. Positron emission tomography, PET, tracks metabolic changes, linking thoughts to energy use. Consider mind-reading experiments. Using machine learning on fMRI data, researchers can decode thoughts, like reconstructing viewed images from brain patterns. This implies thoughts are encoded in neural representations, originating from sensory processing and recombination. Neuroscience offers several frameworks for thought origins. Modular theories, inspired by Fodor, posit the brain as compartmentalized modules for specific functions, e.g., language in Broca's area. Thoughts emerge when modules interact, like combining visual and linguistic modules for descriptive thinking. Connectionism counters with distributed processing. Modeled by artificial neural networks, it views thoughts as emergent from weighted connections adjusting via learning. Rumelhart and McClelland's parallel distributed processing, PDP, model simulates how thoughts arise from activation spreading through layers, explaining phenomena like insight moments when patterns align. Global workspace theory, BARS, Dehaene, suggests thoughts become conscious when broadcast across the brain via a workspace, a dynamic coalition of regions. Unconscious processing handles routine tasks, but novel thoughts require this amplification, originating from competition among neural assemblies. Predictive coding adds a twist. The brain constantly predicts sensory inputs, with thoughts as top-down models minimizing prediction errors. Friston's free energy principle frames this as Bayesian inference, where thoughts evolve to reduce uncertainty. Thoughts aren't static neural events, they are modulated by factors. Genetics provide the blueprint. Genes like FOXP2 influence language-related thoughts. Twin studies show heritability in cognitive traits, suggesting innate predispositions for thought styles. Neuroplasticity allows rewiring. Experiences sculpt the brain, as in London taxi drivers' enlarged hippocampi from spatial navigation. Thoughts thus originate partly from learned adaptations. Environment matters profoundly. Nutrition, stress, and social interactions shape neural health. Chronic stress elevates cortisol, impairing PFC and biasing thoughts toward negativity. Psychedelics like psilocybin disrupt default mode network, DMN, involved in self-referential thoughts, leading to altered origins, like ego dissolution. Disorders illuminate this. Schizophrenia involves aberrant thoughts from dopamine dysregulation, depression features rumination from imbalanced serotonin networks. Despite progress, neuroscience faces hurdles. The hard problem, Chalmers, why neural activity feels like anything, remains unsolved. Thoughts are subjective, scans show correlates, not causes. Ethical issues limit invasive studies, and animal models don't capture human complexity. Emerging frontiers include optogenetics, controlling neurons with light, and brain-computer interfaces, e.g., Neuralink, potentially decoding thoughts in real time. Quantum neuroscience speculates microtubules enable non-classical processing, though controversial. This chapter has illuminated how thoughts emerge from the brain's neural tapestry, structures, signals, and networks interplaying with influences. Yet, neuroscience tells only part of the story. Thoughts are also mental constructs shaped by cognition and behavior. Chapter 4, building on the neural foundations explored in the previous chapter, we now venture into psychology, the study of the mind and behavior. While neuroscience examines the brain's hardware, psychology delves into the software, how thoughts are structured, processed, and influenced at the mental level. Where do thoughts come from in this domain? Often from cognitive architectures shaped by perception, memory, and learning, modulated by unconscious forces and environmental cues. Psychology reveals thoughts not as isolated events but as dynamic elements in a broader mental ecosystem. This chapter will cover key cognitive models, the role of the unconscious, emotional and motivational influences, and how thoughts translate into behavior. We'll draw on experimental findings and theories from cognitive, developmental, and social psychology, highlighting how these insights complement neural explanations. By the end, you'll appreciate the multifaceted origins of thoughts beyond mere brain activity. Cognitive psychology treats the mind as an information processor, akin to a computer. Thoughts emerge from inputs, sensations, processing, cognition, and outputs, actions. One foundational model is the multi-store model of memory by Atkinson and Shiffrin, 1968, which posits thoughts arise from sensory memory, brief impressions, short-term memory, active manipulation, and long-term memory, stored knowledge. A thought like recalling a phone number starts in sensory input, gets rehearsed in working memory, and draws from long-term associations. Baddeley's working memory model refines this, dividing it into components: the phonological loop for verbal thoughts, the visuospatial sketchpad for imagery, the episodic buffer for integration, and the central executive for control. Thoughts originate when these systems coordinate, e.g., planning a route involves sketching mental maps while narrating steps internally. Schema theory, Bartlett, Piaget, explains how thoughts form from organized knowledge structures. Schemas are mental frameworks built from experience. New information assimilates into them or accommodates changes. A restaurant schema generates thoughts like expecting a menu upon entering. Scripts, a type of schema, sequence events, automating thoughts in familiar scenarios. Connectionist models, echoing neural networks, view thoughts as patterns in interconnected nodes. Rumelhart's interactive activation model shows how activation spreads. Hearing bank activates financial and river nodes, with context resolving ambiguity. Thoughts thus emerge from parallel processing, not linear steps. Not all thoughts bubble up consciously. Freud's psychoanalysis introduced the unconscious as a reservoir of repressed desires and instincts, from which thoughts leak via dreams, slips, or free association. The ID generates primal thoughts, the ego mediates reality, and the superego imposes morals. While controversial, this highlights thoughts originating from unresolved conflicts. Modern cognitive science refines this with implicit processes. Priming experiments, show subliminal cues shape thoughts, exposure to elderly word slows walking, implying unconscious activation. Dual process theories, Kahneman System 1 and 2, distinguish fast, intuitive thoughts, System 1, from heuristics, from slow, deliberate ones, System 2, from analysis. Many daily thoughts stem from System 1's automatic origins, efficient but bias-prone. The adaptive unconscious, Wilson, posits thoughts evolve for survival, processing vast information below awareness. Intuition, for instance, arises from pattern recognition honed by experience, not magic. Neuropsychological evidence, like blind sight, seeing without awareness, suggests unconscious perceptual thoughts guide behavior. Thoughts aren't purely rational, emotions color their origins. Affective priming shows moods bias cognition, happy states foster positive thoughts, anxiety negative ones. Appraisal theory, Lazarus, explains thoughts as evaluations of event significance, generating emotions that feed back into further thoughts. Motivation drives thought direction. Maslow's hierarchy suggests basic needs spawn survival thoughts, higher ones self-actualization ideas. Goal-directed thinking, Pollock and Latham's goal-setting theory, originates from intentions, with specific goals sharpening focus. Developmental psychology traces thought evolution. Piaget stages show children progress from sensorimotor, action-based thoughts, to formal operational, abstract reasoning. Vygotsky emphasized social origins, thoughts internalize from interactions, via the zone of proximal development. Social psychology reveals interpersonal influences. Conformity, Ask, shows thoughts align with groups, originating from normative pressures. Attribution theory, Haider, describes how we infer causes, shaping explanatory thoughts. Thoughts don't exist in isolation, they propel behavior. The theory of planned behavior, Adjson, posits intentions, formed from attitudes, norms, and control perceptions, as thought precursors to actions. Implementation intentions, Gollwitzer, bridge gaps, if-then plans automate thoughts into habits. Cognitive dissonance, Festinger, illustrates reverse influence, inconsistent thoughts motivate resolution, often changing attitudes. Thoughts thus adapt to maintain consistency. Disorders underscore this. OCD involves intrusive thoughts from faulty error detection, CBT reframes them, altering origins. Integrating psychology with broader views. Psychology portrays thoughts as emergent from cognitive structures, unconscious depths, emotions, and social contexts, complementing neuroscience's neural basis. Yet, it raises questions: are thoughts determined by these processes, or do we have free will? Chapter 5, with the psychological frameworks from the previous chapter providing a mental map of thoughts, we now ascend to philosophy, the discipline that questions the very nature of reality, mind, and existence. Philosophy doesn't just describe thoughts, it interrogates their essence. What are thoughts ontologically? Are they physical processes, non-physical substances, or illusions? Where do they come from, or matter, mind, or a deeper unity? These questions have fueled debates for centuries, blending with science while transcending empirical limits. In this chapter, we'll navigate key philosophical positions: dualism versus monism, the problem of consciousness, free will implications, and Eastern perspectives. We'll examine how these ideas challenge or enrich scientific views, revealing thoughts as not merely brain outputs but profound markers of being. This exploration will pave the way for cultural and social influences in the subsequent chapter. René Descartes' cogito ergo sum anchors substance dualism. Thoughts belong to the residential cogitans and immaterial mind distinct from the physical body, residential extensor. Thoughts originate in this non-spatial, indivisible realm, interacting with the body via the pineal gland, the mechanism Descartes proposed but couldn't fully explain. This interaction problem plagues dualism. How does the non-physical cause physical effects, like a thought moving a hand? Variations soften this. Property dualism. Chalmers accepts physical substance but posits mental properties, qualia, that what it's like of experience, as irreducible. Thoughts emerge from brain states but aren't identical to them, their subjective feel originates beyond physics. Epiphenomenalism suggests thoughts are byproducts of neural activity, causally inert, like steam from an engine, raising questions about their evolutionary purpose. Dualism appeals intuitively, thoughts feel private and non-physical. Yet, it struggles with Occam's razor, why posit two substances when one might suffice? Neuroscience's correlation suggests thoughts arise solely from brain matter, pushing toward monism. Monists argue reality is one substance, with thoughts fitting within it. Materialism, or physicalism, dominates modern philosophy, viewing thoughts as brain processes. Identity theory equates mental states with neural states, a pain thought is C-fiber firing. Thoughts originate from physical laws governing matter, reducible to physics via multiple realizability, same thought in different brains. Functionalism extends this, thoughts are defined by roles, not composition. Like software on hardware, thoughts arise from input-output relations and internal states. Computationalism, Putnam, sees the mind as a Turing machine, thoughts compute from algorithms, originating in information processing. Idealism flips materialism, reality is mental. Berkeley's Est percipi, to be is to be perceived, posits thoughts as perceptions in God's mind or collective consciousness. Thoughts originate from mind stuff, with the physical world illusory. Neutral monism, Russell, James, proposes a third substance underlying both mind and matter, from which thoughts and perceptions emerge. Panpsychism, gaining traction, suggests consciousness permeates all matter, even electrons have protothoughts. Complex thoughts originate by combining simpler ones, solving the combination problem via integrated information theory, Tononi. David Chalmers' hard problem distinguishes easy problems, explaining functions like attention from why neural processes yield subjective experience. Thoughts aren't just data processing, they have qualia. Where does this inner light come from? Physicalists like Dennett dismiss it as illusion. Thoughts originate from multiple drafts of brain narratives, with no central theater. Emergentism offers a middle ground. Consciousness arises from complexity, like wetness from H2O molecules. Thoughts originate at a higher level, irreducible yet dependent on the base. Critics argue this begs the question, how does subjectivity emerge? Quantum theories, Penrose, Harmeroff, link consciousness to microtubular collapses, suggesting thoughts originate non-deterministically, incorporating free will. Though speculative, they bridge physics and philosophy. If thoughts come from deterministic brain processes, is free will illusory? Compatibilists, Hume, Dennett, reconcile determinism with freedom. Thoughts originate causally but count as free if aligned with desires. Libertarians, Kane, invoke indeterminism. Thoughts arise from self-forming actions, originating in agent causation. Implications abound. If thoughts are unfree, moral responsibility wanes. Yet, experiments like Libet's show brain readiness potentials precede conscious decisions, suggesting thoughts originate unconsciously, with awareness as afterthought. Western philosophy often centers the individual thinker. Eastern views dissolve this. In Advaita Vedanta, thoughts, vrittis, arise from Maya, illusion, obscuring Brahman, the ultimate reality. True origin is the Atman, eternal consciousness. Meditation quiets thoughts, revealing their transient nature. Buddhism denies a permanent self. Thoughts originate from dependent arising, pratitya samutpada, interconnected causes like senses and karma. The skandhas, aggregates, form the illusion of self, with thoughts as empty phenomena. Taoism sees thoughts as chi flows, originating in harmony with the Tao. Overthinking disrupts. Wu Wei, non-action, allows natural emergence. These perspectives emphasize observation over analysis, suggesting thoughts come from a universal source, not isolated minds. Philosophy reveals thoughts as windows into metaphysics. Dualism preserves subjectivity, monism unifies science, consciousness debates highlight gaps, and Eastern views transcend ego. No consensus exists. thoughts might originate from matter, mind, or mystery. Chapter 6. If philosophy raises questions about the essence of thought, culture and society reveal the stage upon which thought unfolds. No mind exists in isolation. From the earliest lullabies whispered by caregivers to the shared myths, laws, and languages that structure civilizations, thoughts are born, shaped, and guided within social contexts. Where do thoughts come from? In one sense, they emerge from brains and consciousness. But in another, they are co-authored by the cultural environments we inhabit. Human beings are profoundly social creatures. Evolutionarily, our survival depended not only on individual cognition but on cooperation, communication, and shared knowledge. Anthropologists argue that the capacity for symbolic thought and complex language developed in tandem with social life. Thoughts, then, originate not only in neural circuits but in networks of people. Emile Durkheim, the sociologist, described collective representations, concepts like morality, time, and religion, that no single person invents but which shape everyone's thinking. To think within a society is to inherit centuries of shared meanings, transmitted through customs, rituals, and institutions. Perhaps the most powerful cultural influence on thought is language. Linguistic relativity, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, suggests that the language we speak doesn't just express our thoughts, it structures them. A culture with many words for snow, or kinship, or honor, invites its members to think in ways others might not. Research supports this. Speakers of languages that mark time differently, e.g., yesterday versus 2 days past, often recall events with sharper temporal accuracy. Cultures with gendered nouns can subtly influence how people perceive objects. Thoughts, in this sense, originate not simply as raw impulses but are scaffolded by the grammar and vocabulary available to us. Yet language also liberates thought. By naming, categorizing, and narrating, language allows us to form abstract ideas, imagine futures, and transmit wisdom across generations. To think is often to speak inwardly, and thus thoughts are echoes of cultural tongues. Beyond language, cultural norms set boundaries for acceptable thoughts. In some societies, questioning elders is unthinkable, in others, skepticism is celebrated. These values influence which thoughts are encouraged, suppressed, or even recognized. For example, collectivist cultures may emphasize thoughts of duty, harmony, and interdependence, while individualist cultures may foreground autonomy, rights, and personal goals. Neither is innate to the brain alone, they are cultivated mental habits, learned through family, education, and media. Even silence has cultural roots. In some traditions, silence reflects wisdom and respect, in others, it signals awkwardness. Thus, the very presence or absence of thought expressions reflects cultural shaping. Every society tells stories. Mythology, folklore, and religion provide frameworks through which people interpret the world and their inner lives. Thoughts of good and evil, destiny and purpose, originate in these shared narratives. A person raised in a culture steeped in karma may frame suffering as cosmic balance, while another might see it as random misfortune or divine test. Neuroscientists find that narrative activates brain regions tied to empathy and prediction. Culturally, narrative doesn't just entertain, it structures thought itself. We think in stories because societies have always thought in stories. In today's world, culture is no longer bounded by geography. Digital technology globalizes thought. A meme born in one corner of the internet can shape political attitudes, humor, or identities halfway across the globe within hours. Social media algorithms act as curators of thought, amplifying certain ideas while burying others. This raises new questions about origin. Do our thoughts come from our own minds, or are they seeded by unseen technological systems? The boundary between private thought and collective influence grows thinner as culture becomes networked. Yet culture is not a cage. Individuals and subcultures challenge dominant norms, generating new ways of thinking. The Enlightenment questioned religious authority, modern feminism redefined gender roles, indigenous movements reclaim suppressed worldviews. In each case, fresh thoughts emerge when individuals resist inherited frameworks. Culture shapes thought, but thought also reshapes culture in a continuous dialogue. Cultural and social forces reveal that thoughts are not solitary sparks but collective flames. They are ignited by language, fanned by norms, narrated through stories, and now amplified by technology. To ask where do thoughts come from is to recognize that no answer is complete without society itself. Chapter 7. If culture provides the shared backdrop for thought, the self is the lens through which those influences are filtered. Every thought seems to belong to someone, to an I that experiences, judges, remembers, and anticipates. But what is this self that thinks? Does the self generate thoughts, or do thoughts generate the self? To unravel this paradox, we must explore the relationship between identity and cognition, tracing how selfhood shapes thought and how thought, in turn, sculpts selfhood. Developmental psychology reveals that the sense of self is not innate at birth but emerges gradually. Infants demonstrate a rudimentary awareness of their bodies, but only later, around 18 to 24 months, do they pass the mirror test, recognizing their reflection as their own. With this milestone comes a new kind of thought, self-referential cognition. From then on, the child's thoughts are no longer just about the external world but about themselves. I am hungry. I am loved. I am separate. Identity becomes the axis around which thoughts spin, allowing for planning, moral reasoning, and narrative construction. Philosophers and psychologists alike have debated the role of the ego, the I that narrates our mental life. William James distinguished between the I, the knower, and the me, the known. Thoughts about the me accumulate as autobiographical memory, creating a coherent identity. Thoughts from the I, however, feel immediate and agentic, anchoring us in the present moment. Modern neuroscience localizes aspects of self-related thought in the default mode network, DMN, which activates during mind-wandering, introspection, and imagining the future. The DMN constructs an internal monologue, weaving thoughts into a story of self-continuity. In this sense, many thoughts originate not in direct perception but in self-maintenance, the ongoing project of being me. Identity is not neutral. Who we believe ourselves to be shapes what thoughts we are likely to have. A person who identifies strongly with being a scientist might spontaneously frame experiences as hypotheses, while someone who identifies with being a parent might filter events through care and responsibility. Social identities, race, gender, nationality, religion also channel thought. They set expectations about what is thinkable, sayable, and valuable. Identity thus acts as a prism, bending cultural inputs into personally resonant thoughts. Eastern philosophies and modern cognitive science raise a radical possibility: perhaps the self is not the true source of thought but a useful illusion. Buddhism teaches anatta, the doctrine of no self, suggesting that thoughts arise from causes and conditions but are falsely claimed by an I. Neuroscientific findings echo this. Decisions often begin in the brain before conscious awareness, hinting that the self is a storyteller who claims ownership after the fact. Meditative practices that quiet the ego often report thoughts arising without an owner, like clouds drifting through an empty sky. This challenges the assumption that selfhood is the fountainhead of thought. Instead, the self may be a narrative overlay, retroactively claiming, "These are my thoughts." Yet even if the self is a construction, it is a powerful one. Thoughts about who we are shape future behavior, reinforcing identity. A student who repeatedly thinks, "I'm not good at math," may form an identity of inadequacy that filters future learning experiences. Conversely, affirming thoughts can expand identity, enabling growth. This feedback loop reveals that the self is both the origin and product of thought. We think ourselves into being, and being informs what we think. Identity is not static but dynamically co-created with thought, moment by moment. Carl Jung introduced the idea of the shadow, the repressed aspects of self we deny or hide. Thoughts linked to this hidden identity may surface in dreams, slips, or sudden impulses. Modern psychology recognizes implicit self-concepts, automatic associations that may contradict our explicit self-image. These unconscious layers complicate the origins of thought. They suggest that identity is not singular but stratified, and thoughts may come from selves we do not fully acknowledge. In examining the self, we find no clear boundary between the thinker and the thought. The self is both sculptor and sculpture, filter and creation, source and echo. Thoughts arise within identity, yet identity itself is a fragile weave of thoughts. This recursive relationship invites humility. Perhaps the self is not the fixed center of thought but a shifting constellation, useful for navigation, but not the final truth of mind. Chapter 8. Up to this point, we have treated thought as something that belongs either to individual brains, selves, or cultural contexts. But what happens when thinking transcends the individual altogether? From ancient councils and religious rituals to modern scientific collaborations and digital networks, humanity has always created systems in which thought is not merely personal but collective. This raises a profound question: can thoughts originate not only in individual minds but in groups, networks, or civilizations themselves? Evolutionary anthropology suggests that our brains developed primarily for social complexity. Robin Dunbar's social brain hypothesis argues that human intelligence expanded to manage relationships within increasingly large groups. If so, thought itself may have originated not for solitary problem solving but for negotiation, cooperation, and storytelling within communities. Joint attention, imitation, and shared intentionality mark the early building blocks of collective thought. When two people focus on the same object or idea, their minds align in ways that generate thoughts no individual could have formed alone. Language amplified this, creating a medium for distributing cognition across people. Research in social psychology shows that groups can outperform individuals on complex tasks, a phenomenon known as collective intelligence. Teams develop shared mental models, distributing roles and expertise so that the group mind holds more than any single member. Philosopher Pierre Lévy described this as collective intelligence, the capacity of groups to pool knowledge and solve problems collaboratively. Examples abound: scientific revolutions, Wikipedia's crowdsourced knowledge, or even jazz ensembles improvising together. In such cases, thoughts do not originate in any single person but in the interactions among them. Yet group thought has limits. Social conformity, groupthink, Janus, and diffusion of responsibility can distort collective cognition. Shared thought can produce both wisdom and folly, reminding us that the origins of thought at this level are shaped as much by dynamics of power and communication as by raw intelligence. Anthropologists and cognitive scientists speak of distributed cognition, the idea that thinking is not confined to one head but spread across tools, symbols, and people. A mathematician's thought does not originate solely in neurons but in interaction with pen, paper, and centuries of accumulated notation. A legal system embodies collective reasoning embedded in texts, courts, and precedents. Maurice Halbwach's concept of collective memory underscores how groups preserve thoughts across generations. Rituals, monuments, and histories encode shared ideas, ensuring that thoughts outlive individuals. In this sense, much of what we think originates in inherited patterns, thoughts given to us by ancestors. Modern technology makes collective thought increasingly literal. Online platforms and artificial intelligence connect billions of people into real-time networks of knowledge, influence, and creativity. Hashtags coordinate movements, collaborative software designs aircraft, algorithms filter and amplify certain thoughts. Some theorists compare this to a hive mind, where individuals function like neurons in a global brain. Philosopher Teilhard de Chardin envisioned the noosphere, a planetary layer of thought evolving beyond biology. Today's internet, with its vast webs of communication, echoes this vision. Still, questions remain: is this truly collective thought, or merely a chorus of individual voices amplified? Do thoughts originate from the network itself, or from individuals whose contributions are recombined? The line between individual and collective origin grows increasingly blurred. Thoughts in groups are not just intellectual, they are emotional. Crowds at concerts, protests, or ceremonies often experience what Durkheim called collective effervescence, a sense of shared mind and heightened unity. These experiences generate thoughts and meanings beyond the individual, often fueling social change or reinforcing identity. Neuroscience reveals a basis for this in neural synchrony. People in conversation or joint activity often show synchronized brain patterns. Thought can literally align across individuals, suggesting that collective states of mind may emerge from physiological resonance. Looking at history, civilizations themselves resemble vast thinking systems. They generate philosophies, technologies, and institutions that no single person could conceive. Some thinkers argue that humanity as a whole resembles a superorganism, with thoughts emerging at the civilizational level. From this perspective, thoughts may originate at multiple scales, individuals, groups, and societies, each influencing the other in nested layers. The self thinks, but the collective thinks through the self. As artificial intelligence and human networks converge, we may be entering an era where the origins of thought are even more collective. Brain-computer interfaces, collective problem-solving platforms, and global knowledge systems hint at futures where individual and collective thought are inseparable. The challenge will be to preserve individuality within collective cognition, ensuring that diversity of thought enriches rather than disappears into conformity. Collective minds remind us that thoughts are not only private sparks but also shared fires. They originate in dialogue, collaboration, and memory that extend beyond any single self. From tribal councils to digital networks, thought is deeply social, an emergent property of human connection. Chapter 9 Thought, in its everyday form, feels tethered to logic, language, and social life. But at the edges of consciousness, when we dream, imagine, or enter altered states, thoughts seem to arrive from unfamiliar territories. Some appear fantastical, others revelatory. These liminal states invite us to ask, where do such thoughts come from? Are they fragments of memory, subconscious creativity, or glimpses into deeper layers of mind? Dreams remain one of the most mysterious frontiers of thought. Freud famously called them the royal road to the unconscious, suggesting that thoughts in dreams disguise repressed desires. Jung expanded this, seeing dreams as messages from the collective unconscious, encoded in archetypes. Neuroscience offers another view. During REM sleep, the brain's visual and emotional centers activate, while logical control from the prefrontal cortex diminishes. Thoughts arise in this state as vivid narratives unconstrained by waking rules. Memory fragments recombine, emotions amplify, and new associations emerge, explaining both the strangeness and the creativity of dreams. Remarkably, some scientific and artistic breakthroughs have originated in dreams, K. Coulé's vision of the benzene ring, Paul McCartney's melody for Yesterday. Dream thoughts, though bizarre, can yield real-world insights. Unlike dreams, imagination unfolds in waking life. It allows us to think beyond the present, to envision possible futures, simulate scenarios, and create worlds that do not yet exist. Cognitive science shows imagination recruits many of the same brain networks as memory and perception, but recombines them in novel ways. From storytelling to invention, imagination is a generative force. Thoughts here originate from the blending of prior knowledge with creative leaps, producing outcomes that feel both familiar and unprecedented. Einstein described imagination as more important than knowledge because it generates possibilities that knowledge alone cannot provide. Across cultures, humans have long sought to alter consciousness through meditation, fasting, chanting, or substances. These practices often produce thoughts radically unlike ordinary cognition. Meditation, for example, can quiet the inner monologue, leading to thoughts that are spacious, wordless, or selfless. Psychedelics can dissolve boundaries of identity, producing thoughts of unity, interconnectedness, or radical novelty. Shamanic traditions interpret such altered thoughts as communications with spirits or other realms. Neuroscience finds that many altered states involve disruption of the brain's default mode network, the hub of self-related thought. When this network loosens, thoughts emerge in freer, less ego-bound forms, sometimes chaotic, sometimes profoundly meaningful. At the intersection of imagination, dreaming, and altered states lies creativity, the capacity to generate thoughts that are original and valuable. Psychologists describe creativity as a two-stage process: divergent thinking, generating possibilities, and convergent thinking, refining them. The subconscious often plays a role, with insights arising unexpectedly, as in the classic aha moment. Such insights feel as if they come from beyond the self, arriving suddenly rather than through deliberate reasoning. Neuroscience shows that during incubation periods, the brain's associative networks continue working unconsciously, producing thoughts that surface when least expected. Many religious and spiritual traditions describe states where thoughts appear to come from beyond the individual entirely, visions, revelations, or direct experiences of the divine. Whether seen as communication with higher powers or as neurocognitive phenomena, these mystical thoughts often carry transformative weight. William James, in The Varieties of Religious Experience, highlighted their common traits: ineffability, noutic quality, a sense of deep truth, and transience. Such thoughts may not easily translate into ordinary language, yet they shape lives and cultures profoundly. Exploring these thresholds challenges the assumption that thoughts always arise from rational, controlled processes. At the edges of consciousness, thoughts often defy logic, emerging from subconscious, emotional, or even transcendent sources. These states suggest that the mind has depths far beyond its surface narratives. By looking at imagination, dreams, altered states, and mystical experiences, we recognize that thought is not confined to the ordinary waking mind. Thoughts can originate in unconscious processes, creative recombination, or transcendent experiences. These thresholds remind us that the mind is not a single chamber but a vast, many-roomed mansion, with thoughts arising from every corner. Chapter 10. We have traveled a long way in pursuit of a deceptively simple question: what are thoughts, and where do they come from? Along the way, we have seen thoughts described as electrochemical signals, cognitive patterns, philosophical puzzles, cultural artifacts, self-narratives, collective creations, and mystical revelations. Each perspective illuminated something vital, yet none offered the whole. Perhaps this is the first lesson: thought itself is plural. It has no single origin, no single definition. It is both material and immaterial, private and public, rational and mysterious. To seek one source is to miss its many-layered nature. Neuroscience showed us the physical machinery: neurons, networks, neurotransmitters. Psychology mapped the mental processes: memory, schemas, emotions, and unconscious influences. Together, they revealed thoughts as emergent patterns within complex biological systems, real, observable, and measurable. Yet science also reached its limits. Correlating brain activity with thought does not fully explain why thoughts feel the way they do. The hard problem of consciousness, the origin of subjective experience, remains unsolved. Philosophy confronted these gaps, asking whether thoughts are purely physical, partly non-physical, or illusions altogether. Dualism, monism, panpsychism, and Eastern non-dualism each offered visions of origin, none conclusive, all thought-provoking. These frameworks reminded us that thoughts are not merely objects of study but mirrors reflecting our deepest assumptions about reality. Culture and society revealed thought as co-authored. Language structured what could be conceived, norms determined what could be said, collective memory preserved thoughts beyond lifespans. Technology globalized thought, knitting billions of minds into networked intelligences. Here, thoughts originate not only in individuals but in systems of meaning larger than any one of us. The self emerged as both the narrator and product of thought. We think ourselves into being, even as our identities filter and constrain what thoughts we have. But the boundaries of self prove porous. In groups, synchronized minds generate collective intelligence, while civilizations themselves behave like vast thinking entities. Thought is simultaneously personal and transpersonal. Dreams, imagination, creativity, and mystical states revealed thought at its most fluid. Here, the origins of thought seem to transcend reason, recombining memory into fantasy, surfacing unconscious insights, or reaching for the ineffable. These threshold states reminded us that thought is not always voluntary, rational, or owned. Sometimes, it arrives unbidden, like a gift from elsewhere. If there is a common thread, it may be emergence. Thoughts emerge at many levels, from neurons firing, from minds reflecting, from cultures narrating, from groups collaborating, from civilizations evolving. Each level builds upon the previous, creating layers of origin. Thought is not from one place, but from many, interwoven like concentric rings expanding outward. And yet, even this synthesis leaves us before the mystery. Why does the firing of neurons feel like anything? Why do symbols carry meaning? Why does silence sometimes seem fuller than thought? These questions remind us that thoughts may never be fully captured by diagrams or definitions. To ask where do thoughts come from is perhaps less about locating a final source than about awakening to their wonder. Thoughts are the medium of our inner lives, the bridge between self and world, the fire that has shaped civilizations. They are at once ordinary and astonishing, arising moment by moment from the dance of matter, mind, and mystery. As you finish this journey, notice your own thoughts, the quiet reader's voice, the questions that stir, the connections forming. Where did those thoughts come from? From neurons, from culture, from your sense of self, from this book? Or perhaps from somewhere beyond all categories? The ultimate answer may be that thoughts come from everywhere. They are the meeting point of biology, society, identity, imagination, and the ineffable. To think is to be woven into a universe that thinks through us. And maybe the most profound thought of all is this, that we can never fully grasp thought's origin because thought itself is the very tool of grasping. The mystery is not a failure, it is the essence.